It's presented as the key to progress, but more often it's just the lock. Modern education behind the reassuring face of compulsory schooling hides something more subtle and dangerous: conditioning. From early childhood, we're taught to adapt, conform, obey, not to understand or question. People grow used to thinking of school as a triumph of civilization, a step forward, a guaranteed right. Yet some have shown that this institution was born with far less noble intentions. In ancient Greece, in Sparta, children were taken from their families to be raised not for freedom, but for blind obedience to the state. No critical thinking, no personal initiative, just discipline. Over the centuries, this model evolved and took on a more civilized appearance, but its purpose remained unchanged. In 1524, Martin Luther wrote to German princes, urging them to introduce compulsory schooling. He had a very specific goal: to shape young minds according to the values of the Lutheran Church, using the state as an instrument. This model took concrete form in the 18th century under the reign of Frederick William I of Prussia, who established the first nationwide system of mandatory education in Europe. But what was his real goal? To build an orderly society, an efficient army, and a disciplined population. Certainly not to inspire creativity or autonomy. Over time, the Prussian model spread to America. In 1852, Massachusetts became the first state to implement a school system based on that design. By the end of the century, the entire country had adopted it. A century later, Europe followed. Education became an assembly line. In the early 1900s, Frederick Taylor Gates, advisor to John D. Rockefeller, openly stated that the goal wasn't to create philosophers, artists, or scientists. The aim was something else: to produce citizens who would adapt to their social roles without ever questioning them. From these foundations, Arthur Schopenhauer raised one of the clearest critiques ever made against the educational system. He saw a complete reversal in the natural order of learning, starting with abstract theories, concepts, and definitions before the student had ever observed or experienced anything concrete. Experience, which should come first, was being erased. According to Schopenhauer, children should be kept away from all abstract content until the age of 16. Philosophy, religion, worldviews, if taught too early, these ideas risk taking root in the mind as permanent errors. His proposal is simple but powerful. In the early years, only objective content. Math, languages, factual history. Nothing open to interpretation. Only what can be learned without ideological distortion. He also pointed out that memory in youth is incredibly strong. What is memorized early often stays for life, for better or worse. That's because it's hard to remove what was learned in childhood. The mind at that age is like untouched soil. Whatever is planted takes deep root, often without any critical filter. The ideas absorbed during that time become the foundation of identity, of how one sees the world and oneself. And even when, as adults, people begin to question those beliefs, they rarely manage to uproot them completely. They remain like emotional imprints that resist reason. That's the real danger. Early error isn't just a mistake of thought, it's a distortion of the soul. That's why Schopenhauer insisted on protecting children from premature and abstract worldviews, not out of excessive caution, but from a deep understanding of how the human mind works. Yet what we call school today still teaches the book first, and maybe reality afterward. First the opinion, then the doubt. A system built like this, the philosopher warned, not only kills natural curiosity, but produces adults who never truly understand what they repeat. Schopenhauer even said that in many cases, illiterate people have better judgment than those who have been educated this way. Because those who learn only from books and not from life often lack common sense. In the same direction moves the sharp and radical critique of Friedrich Nietzsche. His attack on modern schooling is fierce. He doesn't focus so much on how teaching is structured, but on the very idea of universal education. Nietzsche identifies three major problems. First, the absence of real educators. For him, a true teacher isn't someone who simply knows a subject, but someone who embodies a cultural ideal, a noble, cultivated person who inspires through example, not through state-imposed curricula. But in a system that operates like a factory, such educators don't exist. They're replaced by functionaries, bureaucrats, managers of knowledge. The second point is even more controversial. Nietzsche believed higher education should not be for everyone. Real culture, he argued, should be reserved for those capable of bearing its weight. Spreading it indiscriminately only devalues it. And the result? A mass of mediocre people with a thin layer of knowledge, but no depth. And finally, the issue of speed. Education is rushed, forced into timelines decided from above. By 23, society expects people to know exactly who they are, what they'll do, and where they're going. But for Nietzsche, at 30, one is still an apprentice. The rhythm of true culture is slow, it can't be forced. And above all, it's not the same for everyone. Every mind has its own timing, every path its own pace. Moving in a similar direction is the sharp and disenchanted voice of Ivan Illich. With his 1971 book, Deschooling Society, he launched a critique that still feels painfully relevant today. School doesn't create free minds. It produces individuals dependent on institutions. According to Illich, people quickly get used to the idea that nothing can be learned without a teacher, a lesson, or a structure. And so they stop searching on their own, stop exploring, stop questioning. School is the advertising agency that makes you believe you need the society as it is, he wrote. Illich proposed an alternative vision, a decentralized, horizontal, and free model of education. A system where those who know something share it, and those who are eager to learn seek it, without programs or hierarchies. In his view, learning must once again become a human experience, not a performance to be measured. And here, his thinking connects directly with that of John Taylor Gatto, a widely awarded teacher, repeatedly recognized as one of the top educators in the state of New York. For over 30 years, he taught in public schools, trying to inspire his students beyond the official curriculum. But something inside him began to fracture. The more he tried to spark curiosity and critical thinking, the more he clashed with a rigid, blind system incapable of tolerating freedom. Then, at the peak of his career, precisely in 1991, when he was named New York State Teacher of the Year, he made a dramatic decision. He left the school system and exposed its dark side. He wrote a letter to the Wall Street Journal titled, "I Quit, I Think." In it, he explained that the real problem wasn't the students, it was the school itself. He could no longer be part of an institution that suffocated autonomy, creativity, and individuality. "I can't go on pretending I'm teaching," he wrote. And so, he walked away, not out of fatigue, but out of integrity. He realized that to truly educate, he had to leave the system behind. In his writings, such as Dumbing Us Down, he exposed the hidden mechanisms of compulsory education, the confusion between authority and truth, the separation of knowledge from action, and the gradual erosion of autonomy. Gatto wrote, "The truth is that schools don't really teach anything except how to obey orders. A real education should make you an individual, not a conformist. It should teach you how to live and how to die." But instead, modern schooling trains people to obey. It pushes them to think only what they're supposed to think. It constructs a fake reality made of rewards, punishments, grades, and certificates. The common thread between all these thinkers is clear. Education, if it truly wants to be education, must liberate. But when it's imposed, standardized, centralized, it becomes a form of domestication. And those who truly learn to think, to question what they've been taught, often do so not because of school, but in spite of it. So what can we say today? Perhaps that school has become the exact reflection of what it has been producing for generations. An institution that's turned into a social ritual more than a meaningful formative experience. Attending, graduating, getting a degree. These now seem like formalities to avoid exclusion, not genuine paths of growth. Education has been reduced to a status symbol, a pass to participate in society, not a way to understand oneself or nurture what truly matters. People don't study to become wiser anymore, but just to avoid falling behind. They don't learn out of passion, but out of pressure. In this landscape, speaking of education only makes sense if we're willing to question its very foundations. Because today, the most revolutionary act is not to learn more, but to unlearn what was accepted without thought, and to have the courage to question it.